Our skies are full of mysteries. Unidentified flying objects secretly investigated by government agencies all over Europe for decades.
There has been, and indeed still is, I think, great secrecy about UFOs and also a reluctance to talk about this subject.
For the first time, we've collated sightings and reports from across an entire continent.
People want to know what's really going on. They don't just want to leave it up to science fiction to depict it for them.
Some experts insist many sightings have rational explanations.
So if you've got a sighting of something odd in the sky, there's a good chance that it was caused by something natural that we don't fully understand.
But some continue to defy understanding.
Even today, this is a mystery for all of us, really.
Are these visitors from other worlds or natural phenomena? And do our European governments know more than they ever revealed to us? The answer may lie in the untold stories of the UFO files of Europe. For decades, governments across Europe have been keeping files on UFO sightings. To this day, a handful of these cases remain unexplained. A UFO observed high in the sky by 3 Portuguese Air Force pilots. A Scandinavian rocket mystery that sparks a full government inquiry. And a small Italian community where strange luminous phenomena bewilder locals for more than a decade.
A large object, a very bright object, landed in that place.
In 1982, a young Air Force pilot is on a routine flight over central Portugal when suddenly he spots a fast-moving UFO.
These are the sorts of sightings that people do take seriously, where the witness is a pilot and where he's a military officer.
But this is not a momentary sighting. The pilot claims to have flown alongside the UFO for more than 25 minutes, and his astonishing story is backed up by 2 further witnesses.
There are certain just absolutely landmark cases in the history of UFO investigation. As far as I'm concerned, it's right at the top in terms of its level of documentation and its interest in the fact that there were 3 Air Force pilots who witnessed it.
This story has become famous in Europe's UFO files, not only for the extraordinary events that occurred in the air, but for the scale of the investigation that took place on the ground. José Sotomayor is a UFO investigator who was part of the team that spearheaded the original inquiry into the incident. 30 years on, he is still intrigued by the events of that day.
O caso da OTA é caso importante porque é caso diurno, condições meteorológicas excelentes, envolvendo 3 pilotos da Força Aérea Portuguesa, portanto, pessoas com uma grande idoneidade.
Otter Air Base, Portugal, 2nd of November 1982. Otter is a training center for Portuguese pilots. Among them, 29-year-old flight instructor Julio Guerra. Guerra is on a training flight, cruising at an altitude of over 1,500 meters in his Chipmunk, a reliable training aircraft capable of spectacular aerobatics.
Latitude 1092, longitude 8900.
Guerra has since retired from the Air Force and is reluctant to talk about this incident. But in 2009, he told his story to journalist Leslie Kane.
Julio Gueja, who was the main witness in the case, spent 18 years in the Air Force. He's a very reliable, intelligent, and experienced pilot.
10:50 a.m. Guerra catches sight of an unusual object flying at a low altitude beneath him. To get a clear view of the object, Guerra turns his chipmunk 180 degrees. And what happens next takes him completely by surprise.
After turning his plane around, he was watching this thing, and all of a sudden, it shot up in about 10 seconds, really, really fast, shot up just so that it was level with his airplane and just stopped.
Guerra is suddenly face to face with the UFO.
Nossa Senhora, o que é isso?
He was, mystified, curious. Never seen anything like this before. It looked like it was a fuselage without any wings or engines. It didn't look like it had any of the equipment that something needs in order to fly.
The pilot immediately radios back to base to find out if there are any other aircraft in his airspace.
Claro que na base responderam-lhe que não. Mas esta conversa rádio foi ouvida por os outros aviões, porque a esquadrilha dele também estava a operar ali perto, em várias outras zonas. E todos eles ouviram este reporte via rádio.
Guerra reports that he is now being circled by the object.
Guerra para a torre de controle. Guerra para a torre de controle. Copia.
But his colleagues don't take the report seriously.
Of course, at first people were laughing, which is what they often do when they hear you describe something that's very unusual, that might be some kind of UFO.
Guerra repeats his call to the control tower.
Ele disse, se vocês têm dúvida, venham ter comigo. Foi aí que um outro avião, um outro chipmunk, que estava numa área de trabalho perto, esse tinha dois pilotos, que eram o Gomes e o Garcês, ouviram esse reporte e dirigiram-se para o local onde estava o Guerra.
Carlos Garces was the co-pilot sent to meet Guerra that day.
So me and my mate in the plane, we said, well, we have to find that out. Let's go have a look. We knew exactly where each one of us was, So we went there.
Guerra waits for his fellow pilots to arrive. For 15 minutes, he's all alone. The mysterious aircraft is circling him. Finally, the other chipmunk arrives, and Guerra's sighting is confirmed by his two colleagues.
Imagine a flying hamburger, two halves with a grid. One was like no color in it, so raw metal, as you see there. And the other was kind of a reddish, red wine color, It was flying between us.
So you had them one plane here and one here, and the object went in the middle and just kept flying these big loops around them. And because it was between the two planes, they were able to estimate the size of the object at about 8 to 10 feet.
E pronto, e começou ali mais uma caça do gato e do rato à volta do objeto.
But Guerra is growing weary of the chase.
Guerra não quis saber, um piloto militar, ele, digamos que já estava farto daquelas reviravoltas, isto são 25 minutos quase depois, e ele não tem mais nada, ele vai realmente...
Having tailed the UFO for nearly half an hour, Guerra decides to make his move.
Gueja decided he wanted to do something different. And he decided to stage an intercept with the object to force it off its trajectory.
The young pilot goes for broke and aims his chipmunk directly at the UFO.
Julie decided to stop it. He did a bit of a crazy maneuver, tried to stop that thing, and then it went off.
Guerra's bold move provokes a reaction from the UFO.
The thing went above his plane and just stopped right above his plane.
Crazy maneuver, and off it went, just like. well, an amazing speed, and we lost it.
As fast as it appeared, the mystery craft vanishes. Upon landing, the three pilots complete official reports into the incident and provide drawings of what they saw in the sky. But there is no immediate investigation into the encounter.
The reports were filed, and Guerra told me he never heard anything else again from the Air Force. There were no briefings, there was no follow-up.
Yet the Air Force are so puzzled by Guerra's story, they contact UFO investigator José Sotomayor. He demands full access to the case files and pilot reports.
Tudo aquilo leva muito tempo, aquilo passa do coronel para o chefe da base, da base para o outro comandante, e aquilo leva realmente tempo.
Finally, the request reaches General Lemos Ferreira, Portuguese Air Force Chief of Staff. His response was extraordinary.
The general in charge at the Air Force at the time, General Ferreira, he was willing to release the reports that the pilots had filed and any other information on file about the case. He released all of it, which is somewhat unusual. Sometimes civilians have trouble getting information about this kind of event, but he was very willing to release it.
General Ferreira had a good reason for his deep personal interest in the case. 25 years earlier, he had had his own unusual encounter.
He's an important figure in this because he was a general, the Air Force Chief of Staff, very, very high level, and was willing to release the information. Even more important is that he had had a sighting himself, an extraordinary sighting.
November 1982. 3 Portuguese Air Force pilots have been part of an extraordinary UFO encounter. Their report reaches the highest-ranking officer in the Portuguese Air Force, Chief of Staff, General Lemos Ferreira.
O chefe de Estado-Maior da Força Aérea abriu, enfim, as portas para que os civis pudessem investigar esse tipo de casos, não é?
For the first time in Portuguese history, classified military files are released to a team of civilian UFO investigators. All thanks to General Ferreira's earlier experience.
He was a man who obviously took the subject seriously, and because of his own experience, and took the time to file this report. And that's a very interesting aspect of this whole story, is that this general released the information and had had a sighting of his own.
4th of September, 1957. Lemos Ferreira is a young, ambitious pilot, unaware that one day he will be Chief of Staff of the Portuguese Air Force. He is leading a squadron of F-84G Thunderjets from Otter Air Base, the same location that will be used by pilot Guerra some 25 years in the future. Shortly after 9 p.m., Ferreira spots a UFO on the horizon.
He looked over and saw this very bright object. It was like a brilliant star, and there were many colors flashing, kind of scintillating, red, blue, green, and different colors.
Ferreira and the other pilots in the squadron are transfixed by the sight.
The thing that really got them excited was after watching it for a while, these smaller objects came out of the bigger one, and they were like round, sort of like he called them satellite objects, much smaller, about 15 times smaller.
But after watching the UFOs for 40 minutes, Ferreira decides to take his squadron back to base. He files a report on what he and his colleagues had witnessed, but the case is never fully examined.
After he had his sighting, he filed this report. Not much else was done about it in terms of any Air Force investigation.
25 years later, General Ferreira is Air Force Chief of Staff. But what he experienced as a young pilot has never completely left him.
This definitely left an impression on the general. He believed that this subject matter should be taken seriously and should be studied by universities because he knows he saw something that's unexplainable. So I'm sure that's part of the reason why he was so interested in allowing the information to be released on the Guerra case.
Long after his own sighting, the general determines that another UFO incident will not slip through the net. He orders the release of the files.
Tivemos a consciência de estar perante dos casos principais da ovniologia nacional.
Joaquim Fernandes heads the unit of UFO investigators who were handed the files by General Ferreira.
No caso do General Guerra e dos seus dois colegas pilotos, é importante visto ser uma observação feita por 3 pessoas distintas, em 2 aviões distintos, em pleno dia, com modulação significativa em termos da qualidade e do tempo da observação.
Success of the investigation depends on the cooperation of the 3 witnesses.
Sometimes pilots don't like to talk about their sightings. So this is a good example of pilots who were encouraged to report it and to participate and were not ridiculed.
José Sotomayor is the first investigator to interview pilot Guerra.
A primeira reação que eu tive quando estive frente a frente com o Guerra é que é um indivíduo, é um militar a 100%. Frio, calculista, sempre sério.
As the investigation proceeds, the pilots are invited to meet with some of Portugal's preeminent scientists.
Nenhum receio. As pessoas abertamente participaram no encontro, fazendo perguntas, mostrando curiosidade em saber mais pormenores e fazendo perguntas realmente que velocidade é que aquilo tinha, mas que formato tinha.
The pilots described the UFO as being just 3 meters in diameter. But most puzzling of all is the erratic behavior of the object, which appears to move unlike any aircraft the pilots have seen before.
We could very easily be talking about some form of drone. They can maneuver very rapidly in all sorts of strange directions that you wouldn't normally expect of an aircraft, and they do have that ability to hover as well.
Investigators believe even a military drone would be incapable of the maneuvers described by the pilots.
Contra todos os princípios da aviação possível. Como é que é possível? Ninguém ainda hoje conseguiu fazer um objeto com este formato, sem ter hélices, sem ter propulsão, sem ter nada, é impossível.
A descrição e os detalhes que os pilotos da rota nos fizeram do objeto são de tal modo impressivas e diferenciadas na sua aceleração, na sua performance, nas suas capacidades, que colocam desafios importantes à ciência e à tecnologia dos nossos dias.
Using data provided by the pilots, investigators calculate that the UFO performed a 21-kilometer loop in just 30 seconds.
Portanto, chegou-se à conclusão que ele andaria, o objeto andaria à velocidade de 2.500 km/h, a velocidade alucinante.
The calculations reveal the UFO accelerated at more than twice the speed of sound. But an aircraft breaking the sound barrier always leaves a telltale sign.
In the atmosphere, that should cause a sonic boom. No sonic boom was heard by the people living below us.
When an object accelerates beyond the speed of sound, an audible shockwave or boom is generated. However, this craft made no sound.
Tendo em conta que o piloto português não ouviu nenhum sonic boom, que é barulho bastante elevado, bastante alto. Isso quer dizer que o sistema de propulsão não estava a criar uma resistência na atmosfera.
Whatever force propelled the UFO at supersonic speed baffles investigators.
Estes sistemas de propulsão não convencionais terão que usar leis diferentes da natureza que nós, cientistas, ainda não percebemos nesta altura.
The possibility remains that the UFO was not being powered by an engine at all.
It's possible the pilots of the Chipmunk could have seen a weather balloon. Weather balloons do rise very rapidly indeed, stay up in the altitude, at altitude for a specific period of time.
Yet for those who saw the object, the weather balloon theory seems unlikely.
We're talking about 3 pilots, you know, in broad daylight. When you look outside, we can see if that's a weather balloon or whatever. So that thing does not fit in any kind of aircraft you can imagine.
They explored every possible explanation and did all the research required to investigate what might have been in the air that day. And their conclusion was, in this report, that it was something unidentified.
Despite the scale of the investigation, General Ferreira never receives a satisfactory answer to what his pilots saw that day.
The investigation was thorough and they were not able to explain it. So, you know, I have the same opinion as the scientists who did the study, that it's an unidentified object, it's an unexplained object. We don't know what it is, where it came from, why it was there.
But there was one positive result: further collaboration between the Air Force and UFO investigators.
It's very commendable that the general in charge released the information and the Air Force worked with these scientists to do this study. It's very productive for the militaries to work with the scientists because the military isn't equipped to be able to do these kinds of studies themselves.
Pensamos que o dossiê Bota mantém-se em aberto, continuando naturalmente com a classificação de objeto voador não identificado, porque até aos nossos dias, até hoje, não foi possível, de facto, uma identificação positiva para o objeto que foi descrito por o piloto de guerra e os seus colegas, com o detalhe que todos nós conhecemos.
In 1980, a young couple are hiking near a lake in a remote corner of Sweden when a strange flying object performs a terrifying maneuver.
I was petrified. I was really scared. My immediate reaction was that it was carrying some bomb.
What the couple don't realize is that this isn't a unique event. The Swedish government have been keeping secret UFO files on similar cases for nearly 40 years.
The great thing is that so many people did see them, and that the military started a special committee.
Their sighting is one of hundreds that mystified intelligence agencies across Europe.
Despite lots of people coming forward saying that they'd seen these rockets crashing into lakes, not a single piece of rocket was found.
These mysterious craft become known as the ghost rockets. Mudos National Park, Sweden, 31st of July, 1980. Liz and Bo Berg are on a hiking holiday in Lapland, a remote and sparsely populated province in the north of the country.
And this was about 11 in the morning, something like that. I had walked for an hour. A very warm day.
Suddenly, their holiday is interrupted by a phenomenon in the skies.
We heard a swooshing sound.
And like an airplane that's landing.
An unidentifiable craft appears from behind them and shoots across the lake.
What we agreed on was that it was very cigar-shaped. We saw nothing, no colors, no writing, no patterns, nothing. It was very smooth.
What the object does next terrifies the young couple.
It turned around in a U-turn, and then it started coming towards us.
My first thought was that it came back for us.
We held hands and sort of, oh my God, is this going to explode?
But before it reaches them, the object dips and lands in the lake.
Definitely a very controlled landing. Someone was navigating it in some way.
The craft soon disappears beneath the murky waters, but Bo and Liz are in no mood to remain in the area.
This freaked us out so much.
We didn't really want to stay up there.
Upon returning home, the couple make a bold decision and report the incident to the military.
We were hoping to get to know what this was. Mostly they were interested in exactly where we had seen this, and a lot of questions about the shape and the speed and all details about what it looked like and what sounded like and things like that.
What Liz and Bo don't know is that the military is interested in this incident for a particular reason. A reason that dates back almost 40 years. It is less than a year since the end of World War II. Sweden is experiencing hundreds of UFO sightings.
So in 1946, there were a large number of observations in Sweden. Observations on light phenomena and projectiles, moving objects in the sky.
It was in 1946, and the Swedish defense staff get around 1,000 reports from people all around the country, really. About small, couple of meters long, elongated, cigar-shaped craft.
In the year after the war, nearly 1,000 objects are observed darting across the skies. Some are even captured on film. They are dubbed the ghost rockets. Claes Svan is chairman of UFO Sweden, a research group dedicated to uncovering the truth behind mysterious phenomena.
The ghost rocket mystery may be the greatest still unsolved mystery, according to Swedish UFO cases.
The UFO sightings in the summer of 1946 soon make headlines across Sweden.
In May, late May 1946, the first really good reports from daylight observations were pouring into the military. And on the 6th of July that summer, they formed a committee with around 20 persons, mostly military men, but also astronomers and experts from other fields.
On the 19th of July, a UFO is observed crashing into Lake Kolniav in northern Sweden. The newly formed Ghost Rocket Committee sends a team to search the lake immediately.
I think they spent at least 2 weeks there, taking up from the bottom of the lake around 35,000 samples, trying to find some aluminium, some alloy, whatever it was. They didn't find anything at all.
But the Swedish government is determined to crack the mystery at a time of simmering tension in Europe.
We have to remember this was 1946 and people had just survived the Second World War. People were vigilant, and we also had a Europe that was divided into two halves.
At the end of World War II, an iron curtain separates Europe into East and West. Relations are rapidly disintegrating into a Cold War, and paranoia sweeps across the globe. Governments in Western Europe begin to fear the mysterious objects are coming from the East.
The Swedes were absolutely paranoid about their security, so they wanted to know who was firing rockets over their territory. And the obvious culprit was the Russians.
Russia had recently captured the German island of Peenemünde. Barely 140 kilometers from the Swedish coast, this island had been home to Germany's research and launch facility for the infamous V rockets.
There was these suspicions that the Russians could have taken over German technology and that they were using the base in Germany to test different rockets and ballistic missiles.
But if the Russians were testing secret weapons on the island, it seems unlikely they would fire them into Swedish territory.
Why would the Russians take such a risk if they'd just developed this fantastic new rocket? Why would they fire it over Sweden? You know, they've got vast expanses of wasteland in Siberia where they could test it, where nobody would know anything about what was going on. So why would they waste that advantage by firing it over a neutral country such as Sweden?
One mystery puzzles investigators more than any other.
Despite lots of people coming forward saying that they'd seen these rockets crashing into lakes and they'd dredged the lakes and found absolutely nothing, not a single piece of rocket was found.
We have tried to find proof in Russian archives for a Russian involvement into this, but we don't think it was the case really. Wherever they came from somewhere else.
Investigators begin to look for other explanations and examine the precise dates when the UFO sightings had occurred.
This was when there'd been spectacular daylight meteors, which are bits of rock that burn up in the atmosphere, look like rockets when they're seen, trailing debris.
People all over the world are being fooled by meteors and mistaking them for UFOs.
Nigel Henbest agrees that the answer to the ghost rocket phenomenon may lie beyond our own planet.
A meteor is a small chunk of rock going around the sun, and when it meets the Earth, traveling at a really high speed, it burns up in the Earth's atmosphere and it leaves a streak, a trail of light flashing across the sky. And to my mind, that's what we're seeing in this photograph, a piece of space, natural space debris impacting the Earth.
But many people could see clear detail on the objects.
225 observations were made during 1946 in full daylight. But out of the 225, 100 were reports that described rocket-like things, with small fins or without fins.
For Liz and Borberg, the meteor theory seems unlikely.
It was definitely a machine navigating on its own or from a distance. Sort of registered the lake and then made a turn and landed.
Bo and Liz have never been given a satisfactory explanation from the military about the object they saw that day.
And they could have found something, but they were not going to tell us about it.
I definitely felt that they were never going to tell us the truth, of course.
And after more than 60 years and countless sightings, the ghost rocket enigma continues to confound investigators.
When the ghost rockets crashed, they didn't find a single piece. And that mystery still continues today.
Klaus Van remains convinced the truth will one day reveal itself.
And of course, many people ask me, could this be something from outer space? I don't think so. If you look at what the object looked like, it looks like some sort of guided missile, maybe some sort of cruise missile. Why someone should fire those ghost rockets over Sweden? Even today, this is a mystery for all of us, really.
In northern Italy, two friends are fishing at a lake. Suddenly, they are confronted with a strange phenomenon appearing on the horizon.
Il colore sembrava il sole quando tramonta, arancione, quella roba. Quindi.
But this isn't a one-off incident. Over the next 10 years, dozens of similar sightings are reported, leaving bewildered residents searching for answers.
I believe that the Torilia case is very interesting because it involves several persons and in different periods, in different years. That's why I believe it's one of the best cases in Italy.
Rino Di Stefano is an investigative journalist. In the late 1970s, he's working as a crime reporter when locals tell him about the strange happenings in the Apennine Mountains.
I heard about strange event here in Torilia and I started investigating just to understand what kind of phenomena they were.
Torilia, Italy, September 1978. It's 7 p.m. and Elio Dondero is fishing with his friend at Lake Brugneto. Both men observe a bizarre light in the distance. A ball of red-orange light floats up and down on the night horizon. The baffling event lasts for less than 30 seconds before the light quickly disappears. Today, journalist Di Stefano has returned to Torilia. He's meeting Dondero, who still recalls the events of that night vividly.
E senta, questa luce veniva dalla sua destra o dalla sua sinistra?
Noi eravamo messi così, arrivava dal monte là,
Di là?
dall'alto, è scesa giù, ha quasi sfiorato il Brugneto, l'acqua.
Quindi è arrivato quasi al livello dell'acqua?
Quasi al livello dell'acqua, è salita su così.
È salita su così. Quindi praticamente è scesa dall'alto e poi è ritornata verso l'alto.
Sì, è tornato verso l'alto.
E il colore mi diceva?
Il colore sembrava il sole quando tramonta, arancione, quella roba.
Quindi tra l'arancione e il rosso?
Sì,
così?
tra l'arancione e il rosso, così.
Ho capito.
It was 30 years before when Di Stefano first heard of Dondero's story and became determined to find out more. However, he finds information in the community hard to come by.
Nobody was willing to talk about this. Just few people did decide to say something, but very, very few persons.
Di Stefano persists and eventually unearths dozens of separate UFO sightings in Torilia, spanning several months.
I investigated for 2 years and I found many eyewitnesses, and they told me that they saw this very large, bright flying object in the sky.
In 1980, the UFOs suddenly disappear. The investigation stalls. Until 8 years later, when events in Torilia take a dramatic turn.
There was a second UFO wave in 1988, and in this occasion also many people here in Torilia saw this strange phenomenon.
September 1988. At 1 a.m., Flavio Cardinale is making his way home from a night out.
Quando siamo arrivati dove c'è il bivietto che va su a quota 1000, appena superato sulla destra, che c'è un po' di parato che poi degrada verso la montagna.
Out of the darkness, something suddenly appears.
Ho visto una sfera grande con... Io dico una sfera perché vedevo chiaramente che era rotonda e dentro c'era questa luce, un verde molto intenso, pisello, un verde fosforescente che fluttuava dentro questa sfera.
Cardinale is not alone. Over the next 8 months, many others have similar experiences on the same hillside known locally as Quattamille.
There were persons getting their car and going till Quattamille to see this phenomenon, and it was like they were used to go to an open-air cinema to see the show.
The sightings become so frequent that villagers drive in convoy up the hill to catch a glimpse of the now famous UFOs. Some are afraid, but all are bewildered by the Torilia lights.
È un'impressione di bello comunque, di particolare, di strano, cioè perché era una luce intensa, una luce che muoveva, perciò mi ha lasciato... cioè ero affascinato da questo colore, da questo movimento.
Despite uncovering more than 50 separate observations, Di Stefano is still searching for answers.
Something happened up there. Something, I mean, the object, a large object, a very bright object, landed in that place. Because so many people say exactly the same thing.
Nigel Henbest believes that flurries of UFO sightings occur when people misinterpret simple astronomical events.
There are UFO hotspots, places where people see UFOs over and over again, and I think that that's because people are not used to looking up at the sky, and if somebody reports something odd, other people will come there over the following months and the following years, and they'll look up, unusually for them, and they'll see a planet or a shooting star and they'll say, yes, there really are UFOs here.
According to Henbest, the villagers of Torilia could have been witness to an unexpected meteor shower.
These are shooting stars, and they are tiny bits of cosmic rock which come from the solar system, and they hit the Earth's atmosphere and they burn up in a streak of light. Some of them can be brighter than any of the stars, maybe even as bright as the moon, and then we call it a fireball.
But is there a more earthly explanation? Aviation and security consultant Chris Yates thinks the answer could lie in the remote geography of Torilia.
One of the things that immediately springs to mind is a military operation, perhaps a nighttime training exercise with the military personnel out on maneuvers trying to find their way through the mountains from one point to another, using lights to help them to navigate in the darkness.
A military training operation could also account for the momentary red glow witnessed at Lake Brunetto.
What it could have been is, for example, a distress flare being fired off. Distress flares do have a relatively short duration, are a surprise to people who see them and don't recognize them for what they are.
Despite this, Rino Di Stefano considers it unlikely that so many people could have mistaken the lights for distress flares or a military training operation.
They saw a very large object, very bright, and in some cases just a few meters from the ground.
The mystery of the Torilia lights has never been solved. But Di Stefano is hopeful that if more people discuss the events, the truth will one day reveal itself.
For the first time, they are talking about a UFO sighting here in Torilia. Perhaps in the future it will be different because the town administration will make public all this story.
I'd like to find a solution, but I think that there could be a scientific explanation one day.